On January 31, 2025, President Donald Trump made a significant announcement regarding upcoming tariffs that would impact imports from Mexico, Canada, and China, marking a substantial shift in U.S. trade policy. The tariffs are set to take effect on February 1, 2025, with Trump confirming a 25% tariff on goods imported from both Mexico and Canada alongside a 10% tariff on imports from China. This decision is rooted in Trump's broader agenda to address issues related to immigration and drug trafficking, particularly the flow of fentanyl, which he attributes to these neighboring countries. Details of the announcement. During a press briefing in the Oval Office, Trump articulated that his administration's tariff strategy is a direct response to what he perceives as unfair treatment of the United States by these nations. He stated China makes the fentanyl, gives it to Mexico, puts it through Canada, emphasizing his belief that these countries have not cooperated adequately with U.S. efforts to combat drug trafficking. The tariffs are intended to serve as a lever to pressure these governments into taking more decisive action against the trafficking networks facilitating the flow of illegal drugs into the United States. In addition to the immediate tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China, Trump indicated that further tariffs on oil and gas imports would likely be instated by February 18, 2025. He also revealed plans for additional tariffs on a range of products including pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, steel, aluminum, and copper, reinforcing his administration's commitment to reshoring production and reducing dependency on foreign goods. Trump remarked, "It's time for the United States to return to the system that made us richer and more powerful than ever before," referencing historical tariff policies that he believes benefited American industry. Economic implications. The announcement of these tariffs has sparked concerns among economists and political analysts who warn that such measures could exacerbate inflation and lead to higher prices for consumers. Critics argue that Trump's move contradicts his earlier campaign promises to reduce inflation, potentially placing a heavier burden on American households already facing rising costs. Economists from various outlets including CBS News and USA Today have highlighted that the tariffs could slow economic growth and create a ripple effect throughout the economy as businesses pass on the added costs of tariffs to consumers. Responses from Canada and Mexico. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau responded swiftly to Trump's announcement, affirming that Canada is prepared to retaliate against the tariffs. Trudeau emphasized that all options were on the table and signaled that Canada would act decisively to protect its economic interests. He acknowledged the heavy reliance of the Canadian economy on exports to the U.S., stating, "I won't sugarcoat it, our nation could be facing difficult times in the coming days and weeks." The potential for a trade conflict between the U.S. and its North American neighbors looms large, with both Trudeau and Mexican officials expressing concerns over the impact of the tariffs on their economies. Given that a significant portion of Canada's exports are destined for the U.S., the implications of these tariffs could be profound for both nations. Broader trade policy context. This announcement is part of a broader trend in Trump's second term, which appears to mirror his earlier presidency's focus on protectionism and aggressive trade policies. Trump has indicated that he plans to implement a universal tariff on all imports as discussed during his 2024 presidential campaign. While specific figures for the forthcoming tariffs on metals and other goods have yet to be finalized, there is speculation about the possibility of substantial increases in tariffs, especially as Trump seeks to prioritize domestic production. In summary, the sequence of events surrounding Trump's tariff announcement illustrates a significant escalation in trade tensions with key partners and raises critical questions about the future trajectory of U.S. trade policy. As the tariffs take effect, the economic repercussions will likely unfold in the coming weeks, impacting both domestic consumers and international relations. The situation remains fluid, with potential responses from Canada, Mexico, and other affected nations shaping the landscape of U.S. trade in the immediate future. The recent announcement by President Donald Trump regarding the imposition of significant tariffs on imports from Mexico, Canada, and China presents several counterintuitive elements that challenge conventional economic wisdom. 1. Tariffs as a tool for economic success. Trump's assertion that tariffs don't cause inflation. They cause success runs contrary to the widespread economic theory that tariffs generally lead to higher prices for consumers. Economists often warn that increased tariffs can raise the costs of goods, ultimately resulting in inflation rather than economic growth. Trump's framing of tariffs as a mechanism for economic success contradicts this established understanding. 2. Targeting allies to address drug trafficking. The decision to impose tariffs on Canada and Mexico, two of the United States' closest allies, specifically to combat drug trafficking, particularly fentanyl, is a surprising strategic choice. Traditionally, trade partners engage in negotiations and collaborations to address mutual issues such as drug trafficking rather than imposing punitive economic measures. This approach could lead to strained relations and unintended consequences such as retaliation, which may ultimately hinder the intended goal of reducing drug trafficking. 3. Potential for economic backfire. While Trump emphasizes that these tariffs are necessary to protect American interests and bolster domestic production, numerous experts express concerns that such measures could actually slow economic growth and lead to increased inflation. The counterintuitive aspect here is that while tariffs are meant to protect and stimulate the economy, they may instead result in escalated costs for consumers and businesses, thereby undermining the very objectives they are purported to achieve. 4. Long-term versus short-term perspectives. Trump acknowledges that there may be temporary short-term disruption, suggesting that he believes the long-term benefits of these tariffs will outweigh immediate economic challenges. This contrasts with the typical economic perspective that short-term disruptions can have lasting negative impacts on consumer behavior and business investment, potentially leading to a sluggish economic environment. 5. Retaliation risks. Trudeau's assertive response to the tariffs, indicating that Canada is prepared to retaliate, introduces another layer of complexity. The potential for a trade war between the U.S. and its northern neighbor could have long-term detrimental effects on both economies. This is counterintuitive to the goal of fostering economic cooperation and mutual benefit among trading partners. 6. Economic isolationism versus global integration. Trump's approach reflects a return to protectionist policies reminiscent of the late 19th century as he draws parallels with historical tariff strategies. However, in a globally integrated economy, such isolationist tactics can lead to unintended consequences, including supply chain disruptions and increased costs for American manufacturers who rely on imported materials. This presents a contradiction to the contemporary economic narrative that emphasizes the benefits of globalization and interdependence. 7. Misalignment with campaign promises. Trump's campaign promises included commitments to lower inflation and improve the economy. However, the tariffs, which are likely to raise costs for consumers, may contradict these promises, highlighting a disconnect between political rhetoric and economic reality. This presents a counterintuitive situation where the policies intended to fulfill campaign promises could lead to outcomes that are antithetical to those goals. 8. Public perception versus economic reality. Trump's confident assertion of tariff efficacy may resonate with certain voter segments, reinforcing a narrative of American strength and independence. However, the broader economic consequences, higher prices and potential economic slowdown, may undermine public support in the long term as consumers begin to feel the impact of increased costs. In summary, Trump's tariff announcements illustrate several counterintuitive dynamics, particularly the tension between protectionist policies and their potential adverse effects on the economy, consumer prices, and international relations. These complexities challenge the notion that tariffs are a straightforward solution to economic or foreign policy issues. The report on President Donald Trump's confirmation of tariffs on imports from Mexico, Canada, and China highlights several key aspects that merit deeper examination. While the overall narrative focuses on the imposition of these tariffs and the associated political and economic implications, there are important details that are often overlooked but hold significant weight. 1. Connection between tariffs and drug trafficking. Trump's justification for the tariffs is rooted in his claims regarding drug trafficking, particularly fentanyl, which he asserts is produced in China, trafficked through Mexico, and then enters the U.S. via Canada. This framing of the tariffs as a measure to combat drug trafficking is significant for several reasons. Policy justification. By linking tariffs to a pressing social issue like drug trafficking, Trump attempts to legitimize what many economists view as a protectionist measure. It shifts the narrative from economic policy to national security, potentially garnering broader public support. Political ramifications. This justification plays into the larger political landscape, reinforcing Trump's base's perception of him as a tough leader on crime and immigration. It also positions him against perceived inaction from neighboring countries, further polarizing the political discourse. 2. Future tariff plans and broader trade strategy. While the immediate focus is on the tariffs set to take effect on January 31 and February 18, Trump's mention of future tariffs on a range of goods, pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, steel, aluminum, and copper, suggests a broader trade strategy reminiscent of his earlier administration. Long-term economic impact. The potential for a comprehensive tariff strategy indicates an ongoing commitment to reshoring production and reducing reliance on foreign imports. This could have profound implications for U.S. manufacturing and the global supply chain, impacting everything from consumer prices to international relations. Universal tariff discussion. Trump's reference to a potential universal tariff system further complicates the trade landscape. If implemented, it could create an environment of uncertainty for businesses that depend on international trade, as they may face unpredictable costs and regulatory challenges. 3. Economic concerns and consumer impact. Economists have raised alarms about the potential for increased inflation and higher consumer prices as a result of the tariffs. This aspect is critical to understanding the broader economic implications. Inflation and consumer prices. While Trump claims that tariffs lead to success and do not cause inflation, the reality is more nuanced. History has shown that tariffs can lead to higher prices for consumers as businesses pass on the costs. This could undermine Trump's campaign promises to lower inflation, presenting a contradiction that could impact his political capital. Economic growth. The potential slowdown in economic growth due to tariffs warrants attention. The immediate economic consequences could lead to job losses in industries reliant on imported materials, which might not be offset by job creation in domestic manufacturing, particularly in a rapidly changing global economy. 4. International relations and retaliation. The response from Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau indicates the potential for a trade conflict that could escalate tensions between the U.S. and its neighbors. Retaliatory measures. Trudeau's assertion that Canada is prepared to respond forcefully to the tariffs highlights the precarious nature of international trade relations. Retaliatory tariffs could spiral into a broader trade war, affecting not just the U.S. and Canada but also impacting global markets. Geopolitical implications. The tariffs could strain diplomatic relations, particularly with key trading partners. This may shift alliances and trade dynamics in North America as countries reassess their economic partnerships in light of U.S. protectionist policies. 5. The role of political rhetoric. Trump's rhetoric surrounding the tariffs serves multiple purposes. Mobilizing support. By framing the tariffs as a means of protecting American jobs and addressing drug trafficking, Trump seeks to rally his base and appeal to voters concerned about immigration and crime. This tactic can bolster support in key demographics that prioritize these issues. Diverting criticism. The focus on drug trafficking and national security may also serve to divert attention from criticisms regarding the potential negative impact of tariffs on the economy. By emphasizing the urgency of the drug crisis, Trump aims to shift the narrative away from economic repercussions. Conclusion. In summary, while the report primarily addresses the announcement of tariffs and their immediate implications, several underlying factors warrant closer scrutiny. The connection between tariffs and drug trafficking issues, the long-term economic strategy, potential inflationary pressures, international relations dynamics, and the role of political rhetoric collectively shape a complex landscape that extends beyond the surface-level understanding of tariffs. Recognizing these elements is crucial for grasping the broader consequences of Trump's trade policies and their potential impact on both national and global economies. 1. Tariff announcement and economic strategy. President Trump's confirmation of new tariffs, 25% on goods from Canada and Mexico and 10% on imports from China, marks a significant escalation in his protectionist trade policy. This strategy aims to pressure these nations over issues of immigration and drug trafficking, particularly fentanyl. The broader implications of this decision highlight a return to a heavy reliance on tariffs as a tool for both foreign policy objectives and domestic economic reshoring. This is a continuation of Trump's earlier policies, suggesting a long-term commitment to a trade strategy that prioritizes American production and jobs. 2. Potential economic repercussions. Economists have expressed concerns regarding the potential negative impact of these tariffs on the U.S. economy, particularly regarding inflation and consumer prices. The imposition of tariffs typically leads to higher costs for imported goods, which could exacerbate inflationary pressures, contradicting Trump's campaign promises to lower inflation. The concern is that while aiming to protect domestic industries, these tariffs may ultimately harm consumers through increased prices and reduced economic growth, creating a paradox in Trump's economic agenda. 3. International reactions and trade conflict risks. The immediate international response, particularly from Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, indicates the potential for significant trade conflicts. Trudeau's assertive stance suggests Canada is prepared to retaliate against U.S. tariffs, which could lead to a tit-for-tat escalation affecting both economies. Given that over 75% of Canadian goods and services exports go to the U.S., the implications of a trade war could be profound, highlighting the interconnectedness of North American economies and the risks involved in unilateral tariff actions. For long-term trade policy implications, the announcement of planned future tariffs on additional sectors including pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, and various metals signals a broader shift in U.S. trade policy under Trump's administration. This approach raises questions about the long-term sustainability of such protective measures and their ability to foster domestic manufacturing without inciting retaliation from trading partners. Additionally, the potential for a universal tariff system indicates a more systematic approach to trade reminiscent of historical protectionist policies, which could have lasting impacts on global trade dynamics and U.S. economic relations. 1. Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act 1930. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act was a significant piece of legislation enacted in the United States that raised tariffs on numerous imports. Initially intended to protect American industry during the Great Depression, the act led to retaliatory tariffs from other countries and is widely believed to have exacerbated the economic downturn. The tariffs increased prices for consumers and contributed to a decline in international trade, leading to further economic distress globally. The backlash against the act illustrated the downsides of protectionist policies and demonstrated how tariffs can lead to trade wars that hurt domestic economies. 2. The trade war between the U.S. and China 2018-present. Initiated during the Trump administration, this trade conflict saw the U.S. impose tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods, citing unfair trade practices and intellectual property theft. China responded with tariffs on U.S. products, leading to a tit-for-tat escalation. The goal of the U.S. tariffs was to pressure China into changing its trade policies, but the trade war caused significant disruptions in global supply chains, increased costs for consumers, and led to economic uncertainty. The implications of this trade war are still felt today as both nations continue to navigate the complexities of their economic relationship. 3. The Tariff of Abominations 1828. This was a protective tariff passed by the U.S. Congress that raised duties on imported goods aiming to protect northern industry. However, it was deeply unpopular in the southern states, which relied on imported goods and were adversely affected by the increased prices. The conflict over the Tariff of Abominations led to the nullification crisis, where South Carolina declared it null and void within its borders. The tensions surrounding this tariff highlighted the regional divides in the U.S. and raised questions about states' rights versus federal authority, ultimately contributing to the political landscape that led to the Civil War. The future outlook regarding the recently announced tariffs by President Donald Trump on imports from Canada, Mexico, and China presents a multifaceted scenario that could significantly shape economic, political, and trade landscapes in the coming years. Economic impact. 1. Inflation and consumer prices. Economists warn that the imposition of tariffs, especially at the proposed rates of 25% on Canada and Mexico and 10% on China, is likely to exacerbate inflation in the United States. Higher tariffs typically lead to increased costs for imported goods, which can be passed on to consumers, resulting in higher prices for everyday items. The potential rise in prices for essential goods, pharmaceuticals, and technology components could strain household budgets and reduce consumer spending. 2. Supply chain disruptions. The tariffs are expected to disrupt existing supply chains, particularly in industries reliant on imported materials from these countries such as automotive, electronics, and pharmaceuticals. Companies may face increased costs, forcing them to either absorb these costs or increase prices, which could lead to reduced profitability and layoffs. 3. Potential recession. As inflation rises and consumer spending decreases, there is a risk that the U.S. economy could enter a recession. The combination of reduced consumer confidence and increased costs for businesses could slow economic growth significantly. Trade relations and retaliation. 1. Trade war dynamics. The unilateral imposition of tariffs has already prompted a strong response from Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who indicated that Canada is prepared to retaliate. This could trigger a broader trade war with potential tariffs on U.S. exports to Canada and Mexico, further complicating trade relations and economic interdependence in North America. 2. Impact on global trade. The renewed focus on protectionism may lead other countries to reassess their trade relationships with the U.S. Nations may seek to strengthen ties with alternative trading partners or form new trade agreements that exclude the U.S., potentially diminishing American influence in global trade dynamics. Political ramifications. 1. Domestic political landscape. The implementation of tariffs may resonate with Trump's base, who favor protectionist policies. However, the economic fallout could alienate moderate Republicans and independents, impacting their support in future elections. If inflation rises significantly, it could become a critical issue for the Biden administration and other challengers in the 2026 midterms. 2. International relations. The tariffs could strain relations with key allies and trading partners, complicating collaboration on shared global issues such as climate change, security, and public health. Countries may become more reticent to engage with the U.S. on other fronts if they feel economically threatened. Future trade policy directions. 1. Continuation of protectionism. If Trump maintains his presidency beyond 2024, it is likely that the U.S. will continue down a path of protectionist trade policies. This could manifest in further tariffs on imports from other countries, including the European Union, as indicated by Trump's statements. 2. Reshoring of manufacturing. Trump's policies may lead to an increase in domestic manufacturing as businesses respond to tariffs by relocating production to the U.S. This could create jobs in certain sectors but may also lead to increased costs for consumers and businesses reliant on imported materials. 3. Long-term economic strategy. The tariffs could be part of a broader strategy aimed at strengthening U.S. economic independence and reducing reliance on foreign goods. While this approach may have short-term costs, proponents argue it could lead to long-term benefits if manufacturing capabilities are successfully rebuilt within the U.S. Conclusion. In summary, the tariffs announced by President Trump signal a critical juncture for U.S. trade policy that could have widespread consequences for the economy, international relations, and domestic politics. As these measures unfold, monitoring their impact on inflation, trade dynamics, and economic growth will be crucial in understanding the long-term implications of this protectionist approach. The coming months will likely reveal not only the effectiveness of these tariffs in achieving their stated goals but also the resilience of the U.S. economy in navigating these challenges.